Good morning.
Good morning.
Reverend Dr. Suzi Schadle, I'm the interim minister here at Suncoast, and I add my welcome to all the other welcomes. And if you don't feel welcome by now, stay after class, and we'll make sure that you do. So, if you're a late bloomer in terms of welcoming. Okay. How's everybody doing?
Wonderful.
Cool. Well, let's just go home then. We're inspired already. Excellent. So, as many of you know, our theme for this month, from Centers for Spiritual Living all over the world, and us included, is values-based spiritual living through love, compassion, and caring. And I don't know about you, but I'm kind of thinking the world could use an extra dose of that right about now. What do you think? You think we could use a little more? I could always use a little more love, compassion, and caring. This is what Centers for Spiritual Living inspires us to. We embrace love as the self-givingness of God to all creation, moving through us into expression as compassion, caring, mutual respect, and kindness. We express interest in and support for the well-being of ourselves and others. We express unconditional love when observing the suffering of others and do what we can to give aid and show compassion. We could use a whole lot of that right now for ourselves and for one another and for the entire world. And so I think that we are being called upon to take a stand for what it is that we believe in, what it is that we teach, and for us to be the stand for love, compassion, and caring. And let me add a qualifier to that. No matter what. No matter what. We don't get to hedge and say, well, yeah, except in this case. Oh, yeah, but I'm not going to do it here. Oh, well, except on Thursdays. No matter what. Love, compassion, caring, no matter what. Imagine a world where that's happening. Now, today we're going to focus on compassion, the practice of compassion, not just the idea of compassion, but the practice of compassion, which activates it. And like love, which we talked about last week, it's a fairly simple concept, but it doesn't appear to always be easy for us to put into practice, for us to actually become the expression of and to do. You know, compassion is that feeling that we get when we witness the suffering of another, and we are motivated by a desire to help or to alleviate that suffering in some way. It could be an animal, it could be a person, it could be someone you know, someone you don't know. But compassion is when we feel motivated to alleviate that suffering and to do something about it, to make a difference. The wonderful Persian poet Rumi said this. He said, when we practice loving kindness and compassion, we are the first ones to profit. Mm-hmm. So if for no other reason, you could just be like a totally selfish person. And if you practice compassion, guess what? You get your goodies first. And then that compassion spills out onto others. So selfish or selfless, practice compassion, whichever works for you. Compassion does good for the receiver, and it also does good for the giver. Mm-hmm. As our founder predicted many, many years ago, Ernest Holmes said that science would one day prove what the mystics have always known, and that is that compassion is good for you. That's one of the many things, that compassion is good for you. Science, this is for all you scientists and you head people out there, science shows that when we feel compassion, our heart rate literally slows down, calms down, which is, by the way, a good thing. Is, despite what you may think, not really good for you. Boom, 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 that's better. And so when we feel compassion, we get that a nice, steady, slow, calm heartbeat. Also, what happens when we feel compassion is we secrete what's called the bonding hormone, oxytocin, not to be confused with OxyContin, which is an addictive drug which will cause you to need compassion. So it's a bonding hormone called oxytocin, which when it starts to secrete throughout our bloodstream, we begin to feel this sense of wanting to bond and nurture and commit in a more positive, powerful way with other sentient beings. So isn't that powerful that our body actually supports us in being compassionate people? what also happens when we feel compassion is that our brain starts to light up. Parts of our brain light up with feelings of pleasure and caring and increased compassion. So when we feel compassion, it feeds itself, and we feel even more compassion. And we feel good, folks. It's like a drug. But it's legal, and it's free, so take it generously. Neuroscientists are showing that our brain structures are actually, the ones in particular that are involved in positive emotions like compassion, are more subject to change from positive or negative input from within or from without. So those positive emotion places in the brain are susceptible to change, and it depends on what we sort of bombard it with, positive or negative. So what it means, the good news here, is that we can further develop our love and compassion muscles. We can further develop that literally in our brain, which then instructs our entire body, which instructs our thinking and our feeling and our believing and our very spirit and ultimately our actions and behaviors. Isn't that powerful? Your entire body, your entire mind, your entire being conspires for your good and for the good of others. How cool is that? Right? We hear so many times how our bodies betray us. Isn't it nice that every now and then it supports us, in good things? So we can further develop that compassion, that compassionate part of us with the appropriate context and consciousness. So we bombard it with the appropriate context and consciousness, and we become more loving and compassionate. So what might that appropriate context and consciousness look like? What might that look like? Well, here's the deal. If we allow ourselves to become completely immersed within, in that space within us that knows that what we think and the environment with which we surround ourselves, what we think, feel, and believe, has an impact on how we think and behave, right? How we act. So we want to become immersed in very conscious, intentional, positive thought, feeling, and belief, which will show up in our outer behavior and attract to us a crowd, a gang that's good for us, that supports all of that goodness in us. So immerse yourself in positive thought, feeling, and belief, and people, and activities that are all positive, like a wonderful, aromatic, fabulous tea bag, immersing yourself in the water of good, right? So think of yourself as a tea bag, the good kind. I'm talking about the really spicy, wonderful, healthy kind. That's the kind I'm talking about. I just need to backpedal there just a little bit. Sometimes these off-the-cuff analogies, I'm like, oops, which is better than some that I've come up with. And sometimes I'm like, okay, Suzi is now leaving the building. Okay, so good tea bags, right? The really expensive ones from the health food store, that's the kind. Okay, so what we know from this teaching is that our inner thought, our inner feeling, our inner belief is reflected in our outer actions and behaviors and the experiences that we attract to ourselves. So we must be very careful to plant the seed for the flower of compassion to grow and flourish. We've got to plant that seed and really nurture it for that flower to bloom. Now, one of the things, as I said, I'd say it's really a pretty simple concept to be compassionate, to be caring, to be loving. It's a pretty simple concept, but it's not always easy for us to do. When it gets to the doing part, we're like, yeah, who's for compassion? Yay! Everybody screams out, right? But then it's like, who's acting compassionately 99.9% of the time? Well, not me. Well, I don't know. So that it's a little harder to put into practice. So that's why they call it practice. That's why you got to practice, because it's not, we sometimes react more than we respond to things and situations, right? That's why it's a little more difficult to put into practice. But one of the things that helps us to make it easier to put into practice is to remind ourselves of the deep realization of our oneness with all of life, which naturally begins to awaken that understanding and compassion that already resides within our mind and our heart. It brings it forth, it brings it out, it magnifies it. And it lifts our consciousness. And not only does it lift our consciousness, it lifts the consciousness of others around us. And it lifts the consciousness of this entire planet, of all of humanity. And we all begin to benefit from it. And we truly begin to create that world that works for everyone. A world filled with love and compassion and caring. How cool would that be? How cool is it when it actually happens? Because it does. You notice when there's a natural disaster or even an unnatural one, that compassionate, loving, caring people come out from the woodworks. You notice how that happens? It draws them out. What if we didn't wait for a disaster to trigger that? What if that's how we default? That's our default lifestyle? Then maybe those triggering disasters, especially the man-made ones, might not have to happen. What do you think? Is that possible? I mean, all you have to do is look at the headlines. Look at the headlines that are happening. Is there need for more compassion, love, and caring in this world right now?
Oh, yeah.
I think so. And let's send some of that. Really energetically, I'm asking you today, in this moment, and every moment moving forward, send some of that love, compassion, and caring out to places like Barcelona and Charlottesville and here in Florida. What was it, like 5, 6 policemen were shot in Florida this week. You know, send all that love, that understanding, that compassion, that caring out. Be the presence of that. Because know that like light always overtakes darkness. The tiniest light overtakes darkness. And if we grow that light by gathering together, we become like a laser. Sending that light out into the world and being the presence of that so that we literally shift the momentum in the direction of good. I think it's possible. I think it's possible. And I do believe that there are more people that are practicing love, compassion, and caring than there are being whatever they are. I mean, you know, people that come from a place of hate and anger and viciousness, there's a broken place within them. Here's the really tricky one, to have compassion for even that guy. For us to have compassion for that guy, to start to tap into the compassion, the love, and caring that exists within that person, because they too are spirit. They've forgotten. That muscle has atrophied in them. But our very presence as love, compassion, and caring can start to what is that therapy? What's the therapy you do when, what? Physical therapy. Now, this is spiritual therapy. Spiritual therapy. We're going to help them to exercise those spiritual muscles. It exists within them. I was listening to a thing on the NPR the other day, and they were doing an interview with this guy that started an organization, and I can't remember I wish I could remember the name of the organization. But it has to do with, it's like recovering haters or something like that. And it's people that have been white supremacists and neo-Nazis and all these horrible things, and they've created an organization, almost like they do with people who have drug addictions, to bring them out of that and to it's like to reprogram.
Rehabilitate.
Yeah, rehabilitate. There you go. That's what I was looking for. Thank you. I knew that was like a word. Thank you. So there's a way to rehabilitate. Because it is not our natural inclination to be hateful and mean and vicious and all those things. But we get wounded, often very, very tiny, and then we grow up with that woundedness being guided and directed by the woundedness. So we must have love, compassion, and caring for that person who has an unhealed wound that is screaming for rehabilitation, right? So if an organization, and apparently there's a pretty big organization where people are coming in, it's almost like, when gang members go and then they become, they change and they become really contributing members of society. So everything is possible with God, with Spirit to guide us. So, miracles happen. It's a wonderful thing. So here's what Ernest Holmes, our founder, says about this whole idea. He says, realizing that I am one with all people, I affirm that there is a silent power flowing through me and them, which blesses and heals and prospers, makes happy and glad their pathway. And I love this part. Listen to this. This could be said about any spiritual tradition, any religion. But he said it a long time ago. He said, if the philosophy of Christianity were lived, wars would cease. Unhappiness would cease. Economic problems would be solved. poverty would be wiped from the face of the earth, and man's inhumanity to man would be transmuted into a spirit of mutual helpfulness. Wow. If we all could remember where we came from, who we truly are, we come together as one, not as separate and fighting because the other must be wrong. We start to see the Spirit in one another. We see ourselves in one another. I look at you and I see me. And I see that we are one. We are the same with just unique trappings, unique gifts to offer. And that's what we need to focus on. And, global compassion, this is not sort of oh gosh, that'd be nice if there was global compassion. If there was any kind, yeah, that'd be nice. No, global compassion is essential to the survival of humanity and the planet. That's how important it is. It's essential. Essential. Global compassion, essential for the survival of humanity and the planet. And it means that we must act from that love, compassion here. We must act, not just think about how good it could be if we were to act. No, we must act from it, cultivate it, develop it, deepen it, and act from it. The Dalai Lama said, compassion is not religious business. It is human business. It is not luxury. It is essential for our own peace and mental stability. It is essential for human survival. So if there are any muscles that you want to exercise, I'm giving you a pass at the gym. You can pass at the gym one day a week and spend that entire day exercising your spiritual muscles of love, compassion, and caring because it's essential to life. We are immersed in and surrounded by this law of cause and effect. We are the cause of the effect that we then experience. We are immersed in and surrounded by this law of cause and effect. And it takes all of our deeply held thoughts and feelings and beliefs and ideas and transforms them into the reality of our experience. Therefore, it is very important that we stay conscious and awake to what it is that we are thinking, feeling, and believing, because it's going to show up in your life. It's going to show up in the lives of people you care about. It's going to show up in the lives of people you don't care about. It's going to show up in the life of humanity, in the life of this planet. So it'd be really good if we made sure it's what we want to show up. Right? Conscious, present, fully present. And guess what? Compassion works in much the same way as that. Much the same way as the law of cause and effect. As we feel and know our oneness with spirit and with all of life, our natural compassion then arises as the cause of our compassionate action. So as we steep ourselves in that idea of oneness, in that knowing that we are one with one another, I mean, imagine that there's no space between us, that we're all totally connected as this one being. It's the blob of God, my friends. I love that picture. Do you get the image of that? Blob of God. Actually, a friend of mine is a musician who wrote a song called The God Blob, which is a great song. So we're all part of this blob of God. Now, would you take one of these pens and start poking your own self in the arm? Not if you're in your right mind. So you've got to get your mind right. You've got to get your mind right, in alignment with spirit. Get your mind and heart right, in alignment with spirit. Remember the truth of who we are. We are one. We are all emanations, expressions of the one spirit, and we're in this whole thing together. So if we come from that place, then our natural compassion that exists already within us, that we're cultivating and nurturing and developing and growing and deepening, becomes the cause of our compassionate, loving, caring action in the world. And the world becomes a better place. And the world begins to work for everyone. And how cool is that? So as we cultivate that compassion inwardly, vital, powerful, inspiring ideas start to come forth. They give us ideas for how we can act compassionately and lovingly. And those ideas naturally flow to us and through us and as us, and we become the act of compassion. We become the practice of love. We become the practice of caring for one another, caring for ourselves. Guess what? You do get to be part of the equation. Yes, it's okay to care for yourself. Grandma! My grandmother was so, she was so, anything that any positive feeling you had about yourself was a terrible thing and selfish. I hate to tell you, Grandma, but you were wrong. Grandma, but you because we are not capable of giving to another person what we're incapable of giving to ourselves, and that is love, compassion, and caring. If we can't wash our own selves over with it, there's nothing for us to give to somebody else. So yes, it's okay to love yourself. Yes, it's okay to have compassion for yourself. Yes, it's okay to care for yourself. Self-care is a good thing. It fills us up so that we're not giving from a place of depletion. Compassion as understanding becomes an action that is motivated by loving kindness. Compassion becomes an action that's motivated by loving kindness and a deep faith in our oneness with spirit and with one another, and our oneness with good, our oneness with the goodness of life. It's there. It's there for the taking, my friends, and it's supposed to come to us. Suffering is optional. We don't have to suffer. But we do need to have compassion for when suffering shows up. I want to read you a story. This is a story of one of Gandhi's successors, and it, I think, is a beautiful example of compassion, a compassionate idea activated and made manifest. It's kind of a long story, but it's very inspiring and it feels good. And I think we could stand to feel good. You think? Mm-hmm. Feel good. It's like it's like a chick flick, you know. But it's mostly men in here, so it's mostly men in the story. So I want to read this. I want to share this with you. In 1916, at the age of 20, a young man named Vinoba was trying to come to a decision. Should he go to the Himalayan mountains and become a religious hermit? Or should he go to West Bengal and join the guerrillas fighting the British? He came across a newspaper account of a speech by Gandhi. Vinoba was thrilled with what he read. And soon after, he joined Gandhi in his ashram. An ashram is a religious community, but for Gandhians, it is also a center for political and social action. Vinoba found in Gandhi the peace of the Himalayas united with the revolutionary fervor of Bengal. Gandhi greatly admired Vinoba, commenting that he understood Gandhian thought better than he did himself. In 1940, he showed his regard by choosing Vinoba to lead off a national protest campaign against British war policies. And after Gandhi's assassination in 1948, many of Gandhi's followers looked to Vinoba for direction. Vinoba suggested, now that India had reached its goal of Swaraj, which means independence or self-rule, the Gandhians' new goal should be a society dedicated to Sarvodaya, the welfare of all. The name stuck, and the movement became known as Sarvodaya Movement. A merger of constructed work agencies produced Sarva Seva Sangha, which means the Society for the Service of All, which became the core of the movement and the main organization working for broad social change inspired by Gandhi's consciousness. Vinoba had no desire to be a leader. Kind of sounds like Moses. Remember, Moses didn't want to be a leader either. All these spiritual people, I don't want to. So Vinoba was the same. He said he had no desire to be a leader, but that preference was preempted by events in 1951. Following a conference, Vinoba announced his intention to journey through the district of Telangana. He couldn't have picked a more troubled spot. It was the scene of an armed insurrection. Communist students and some of the poorest people in the region had united in a guerrilla army to try to break the land monopoly of the rich landlords by driving them out or killing them and redistributing their land. The villagers were terrified by both the guerrillas and the government troops, as each side would kill villagers they suspected of supporting the enemy. Vinoba and some of his followers held a prayer meeting that drew thousands of villagers and landless Harijans A Harijan that's the name that Gandhi used for untouchables or the outcasts of society. And literally the name Harijan means child of God. And so the Harijans asked Vinoba if he could help them to get enough land to live on. And Vinoba presented the Harijans' problem to the prayer meeting. And he said, "Brothers, is there anyone among you who can help these Harijan friends?" And a prominent farmer stood up and he said, "Sir, I am ready to give 100 acres." Here, in the midst of a war over land, was a farmer willing to part with 100 acres out of simple generosity and compassion. Vinoba was just as astounded when the Harijans declared that they only needed 80 acres and wouldn't accept more. So they only asked for what they needed. Vinoba saw a solution in this idea to the region's turmoil. It seemed to him a sign from God. At the close of the prayer meeting, he announced that he would walk all through the region to collect gifts of land for the landless. He began the movement called Budan, which means land gift. Over the next 7 weeks, Vinoba asked for donations of land for the landless in 200 villages. And in each village, to his continued amazement, the donations poured in. Soon Vinoba was collecting hundreds of acres a day. And what's more, wherever Vinoba went, the climate of tension and fear that had plagued the region began to dispel. In places where people had been afraid to assemble, thousands gathered to hear him, including the combatants. At the end of 7 weeks, Vinoba had collected over 12,000 acres of land. After he left, his followers, continuing to collect land in his name, received another 100,000 acres of land for the landless. That, my friends, is practicing compassion in action. It's powerful. It gives me chill bumps. The idea that someone, with a very simple request, and someone meeting that request, and someone else gracefully accepting it, and then saying, "Hey," sometimes the simplest thing eludes us. Ask, make a request, ask for what you need, and see if there might be some compassionate help for you that doesn't cost lives in order for it to happen. How cool is that? Compassion in action is a mighty, mighty force, creating a world that works for everyone. Compassion in action can help us to create that world and make the world a better place. And it starts right where you are. It starts right where you are with a consciousness of oneness and love. And that just emerges out from you and showers the people. Showers the people. Shower the people you love with love. Shower the people you don't love with love, especially shower them. And guess what? You'll get caught in the shower too. How cool is that? We each can make a difference by practicing love and compassion. Allow yourself to be empowered and guided by the very spirit within you. You can't go wrong. I guarantee it. I guarantee it. Ernest Holmes taught, compassion and caring are the ties that bind us together in mutual understanding and in the unified attempt to uncover the divinity in each other. Compassion is the most gentle of all human virtues, for it is the outpouring of the divine giving in us through all. I love this part. This is what I was saying to you before. Compassion and caring are the ties that bind us together as one, in mutual understanding, in the unified attempt to uncover the divinity in each of us. When we shower someone with love and compassion, it uncovers the divinity within that person so that they can then shower someone else with love and compassion. That's how it works. It's the outpouring of divine givingness through all. Within your very spirit, right now, is a vital, vital stream of vibrant ideas flowing forth, flowing from you, from this awakened heart of compassion that lives within you. Awaken that heart of compassion. Keep it awake. Rumi said in one of his poems something along the lines of, do not go back to sleep. Do not go back to sleep. Awaken that heart of compassion and keep it awake and keep it alive. Don't dismiss these ideas. Don't dismiss these impulses for love, compassion, and caring. Don't dismiss those, but rather follow them with all of your heart and all of your mind because it is the divine outpicturing of compassion in action in your life, which has an impact on the lives of those around you, has an impact on the lives of this entire humanity, this entire planet. Commit to practicing compassion with yourself, with others, and affirm, listen to this, close your eyes if it feels right for you. Listen to this affirmation. I'm going to have you repeat it in a minute. I see with love and I feel with compassion. I hear with love and I speak with compassion. I speak with love and I act with compassion. So I'm going to ask you to repeat those after me. I see with love and I feel with compassion.
I see with love and I feel with compassion.
Let's do that one again. I see with love and I feel with compassion.
I see with love and I feel with compassion.
I hear with love and I speak with compassion.
I hear with love and I speak with compassion.
I hear with love and I speak with compassion.
I hear with love and I speak with compassion.
I speak with love and I act with compassion.
I speak with love and I act with compassion.
I speak with love and I act with compassion.
I speak with love and I act with compassion.
So allow that idea of love, compassion, and the caring that it results in to wash over you, to come from the very center of your being, wash over you and wash over all whom you meet and all whom you do not meet. Allow it to flow out into the world in ways and places that you cannot even imagine. Love, compassion, and caring, essential to life. Ours, everyone's, the planet, the cosmos. It is the way that we make the world a better place and create a world that works for everyone. And that's a big order, it's a tall order, but I know that all things are possible in spirit. Doesn't mean they're always easy. They are possible, not always easy. Simple, not always easy. Particularly when you see someone behaving in such a way that causes a reaction in us. Those are the times especially that we need to call love, compassion, and caring into action. Remember when someone acts out of craziness, that there is an unhealed, wounded place in them that is screaming out for love, compassion, and caring. Love, compassion, and caring. And I guarantee you, my friends, I don't do this perfectly, but together we can support each other in getting better at it. Yeah. There's a well-worn place on my carpeting in my living room where I have paste with reaction rather than response, paste with something that doesn't quite resemble love, compassion, and action. But I'm working on creating another well-worn space that does. So we practice. That's why they call it a practice. We practice. So blessings on your journey of compassion. Compassion is the heart and soul of who we truly are. Practice compassion. Practice compassion into action. Activate and express it. The world will be a better place. And so it is.
And so it is.